Hey there, and welcome to the podcast Tiling Connect, hosted by Mark Moskwa. This show is designed to connect people with the best information intended to strengthen the business of tiling. To keep up to date with all the episodes, don't forget to subscribe.
Hey everybody, Mark here from Tiling Connect. Welcome to today's episode. I have the honour and privilege of speaking with Frank Moebus, who has been in the industry for a long, long time. There's no other way of putting it. It would be definitely 2 decades, and has contributed immensely to the tiling and waterproofing space. And as we have it in every episode, I don't like to chew up the airtime with my voice too much. So I'm going to welcome Frank to the show.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for having me on.
Hey, mate, you're very welcome. Frank, I'd love to really wind it back to the beginning. You and I have known each other for at least 15 years that I know of. There could be a couple of other years in there somewhere. Mate, tell us about your time in the industry and how it all started, and give us a background. Give us a good look at your background.
It was just a little bit longer than a couple of decades ago. It's actually closer to 5, to be honest. So I was born in Germany into a family of a tiling company. My old man's a tiler, has been for a long time, and his brother was a tiler. And things are a little bit different in Germany. You know, it's a lot of supply and fixed tiling. So I grew up with sheds in the backyard full of tiles. So we used to play hide and seeking. So that's my very first introduction. But when it became, when I got to like 10, 11, 12, guess what I had to do in school holidays?
Tile.
Off to the building sites. Come along, Tiger. Let's do a bit of tiling. So obviously, like every young fella, first job's on a broom and a shovel. But, you do learn how to do some tiling. You know what hand fixing of tile is? Standing cement, mud on the back of the tile, and you tap the tile into the wall. That's basically how it was done back in those days in the mid-70s.
That's a pretty remarkable start, right? Not too many people can say that they've done that, I imagine.
No, and not too many people in my age that learned in the basics of the trade in Europe. It's a little bit different. They build more solidly over there because it tends to get a bit cold in winter time with frozen ground. So building's a little bit different over there. But yeah, came here when I was 16 and went to high school, went to university, spent some time in the military, and then tried my hardest to get out of the tiling industry, to be honest, but it kind of sucked you back in this game.
There was at least a few times, wasn't there, that you tried to exit stage left?
Oh, I've done it. The good thing, about when you do learn a trade is you can try so many different things, anything you like, but you've always got your trade to fall back on. If you, and that's, I encourage young people out there, learn a trade. Because once you got the trade behind you, then the world's your oyster. You can try whatever you like.
So when you moved over here, you were 16. Have you always been in Queensland? Has that been sort of? Or
we actually originally came to Melbourne, and we lived in Sorrento. You know where Sorrento is, down the Mornington Peninsula.
Mornington Peninsula, yeah.
Yeah, and we came in May, which is kind of in the middle of the school year. So I spent the first year on building sites.
Yep.
Like we did the refurb of Flinders Street Station. We did the new construction of Box Hill stations. Now I'm really aging myself. Those buildings, it was in the commercial space.
Yep.
And then at the end of that year, I went back to high school and finished what was then called HSC. I don't know what it's called nowadays. Some weird name, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Then after that, I went to uni.
What did you study at uni, mate? I know that there's a number of things on your CV, but if I had to remember them off the top of my head, I would get all of them wrong.
That's not listed on my CV at all, mate.
Oh, isn't it? No? Okay.
No,
They would be your qualifications that I saw.
Yeah. I actually got into medicine, so you could have called me Dr. Frank right now if I'd stuck with it.
All right.
Yeah, but it wasn't for me, mate. I had enough of study, so I got out of that. Spent some, actually joined the Army Reserve. Spent 9 years in there, and that's really where I got my introduction to the training side of life. I was at a unit that trained young officer cadets that end up becoming officers and what they call leaders of men. So I did a lot of training over those 9 years of young people, which is good. Really, really enjoyed training.
What is it about the training that you enjoy most? Is it?
Oh, well, you acquire some knowledge over your life, and you need to. I think everyone who has that knowledge has an obligation to pass it on. And it's no good, taking it to the grave with you. Just leave the place a better place than when you found it. That's my philosophy, and if part of that is training young people, or even older people. I still run training sessions now for tradies that have been in the industry for years.
Keen to learn?
Well, I think it's important. As soon as you stop learning, that's it. You need to learn and move forward and improve, get better.
I imagine there's a massive emphasis on training in the ADF, like a lot of organisations, but more so in those sort of departments.
Well, unless there's some sort of military action somewhere, it is literally all training. There's
all training,
nothing else you do. And I was a defence member at a time where it was relatively stable in the world. There's nothing going on. But when I got out, we've obviously had some time in Afghanistan. We've had East Timor before that.
Yeah,
been a few things going on. But that was after I discharged.
So you would have acquired a whole bunch of skills there. And when was it post the ADF that tiling came calling again?
Oh no, I was in the Army Reserve, so I was had a full-time job, and my military service was on as a reservist. So I still had, I was still working full-time plus doing military service. So it's not like tiling came calling after it or during. It just continued. It
was always there.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And further on in your career, how did tiling? What did tiling look like for you as the years went by?
How do you mean?
Were you tiling locally in Queensland? I mean, did you have a particular flavour, or did you have any specific types of tiling that you were doing?
Look, I spent a lot of my early tiling career in the 90s. We moved to Queensland in 93. Basically there was not much work going on in Melbourne. Queensland had a reasonably active construction industry, so we moved up here. Started off really in house building, in space of domestic houses, mum and dad sort of houses. I sort of started my own business in, I guess, 98 or something like that. Got my QBCC license, did my own thing. That's quite interesting when I left, departed from the old man, I really had a blank slate, nothing.
Yeah.
We had a bit of a disagreement, and I said, "No, see you later, I'll do my own thing." So basically, the Strathpine Brendale area, there was about 15 tile shops in close vicinity. So I went into every single tile shop and I said, "Start my own business. Happy to can I leave some business card here? Happy to do any kind of work. I'm not too bad at sales, so if you don't mind, I'd like to come on here on Saturdays to help some of your customers with selections of what you can and can't tile, etc., etc." I went to every single tile shop, and finally, one of them said, "Okay, no worries, let's come in on. Happy for you to come in on Saturday." So I did that and actually won quite a bit of work.
Yeah, awesome.
Doing that, and it actually benefited the tile shop as well.
That's a pretty innovative approach, right? I mean, I think this may be the second time I've heard that, because I know that you and I have known each other for a while, and I'm pretty certain that we've touched on that just in conversations in the past. And I still, now that you say it again, I recall us speaking about that over a decade ago, and I even then thought it was just such an innovative way to grow your brand and grow your skill and acquire more business. It's just for a very, very little investment, just a bit of time, right?
Just a bit of time.
Yeah.
But one, that happened to be the tile factory outlet in Launton, right? Which, as you probably know, is the shop I bought later on, right?
Yeah.
And David Peel, who's mountains and mountains of industry experience of tile supply and wholesale and import, he always said this: if you walk into a carpet shop, you don't walk out with a roller carpet on your shoulder and a bunch of carpet layers business cards in your hand, right? So if you can do the supply and install deal at the time, then you've basically made that deal. And if you do a right job, you get referrals, which is the other part of that. So it worked in my favour. My business got started. And look, I don't mind doing a kitchen splashback.
Yeah.
If someone wants a kitchen splashback done, I'll do your kitchen splashback, no problem. But at the same time, you might want 100 metres of patio tiling done.
Yeah.
Well, I'll do that too.
Nice.
But you can talk to people while they're there selecting the tiles, and you can say, okay, well, this tile in this situation, it's probably not ideal because of this, this, and this, and this. And when you've got a tiling license, for some reason they listen to you more than when you're the salesperson in the shop. So it worked really well for both of us.
Yeah, mate, perfect. I my earlier days, I started off working in retail showrooms selling tiles. You would remember Ceramic Tile Market down at Springwood there. CTM at the time when I was working for them had, I think, 11 shops around Australia, partially South African owned. I can feel your I can verbally and physically feel what you're saying, because a lot of customers would already come in after speaking with a tiler about what they should select for their bathrooms or main floor areas. So there was that preconceived idea before they even stepped foot in the store. They'd consulted with a professional, and that person had given them the advice based upon their house or the project that they were doing. And that conversation, and you could just feel that they were quite influenced by the contractor in what to choose. So you could noticeably see the difference between someone that had already engaged with a contractor versus someone that hadn't engaged.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, the funny thing was always, what do you think of this colour? And I'm going, I'm keeping out of colour, mate.
I'm not a colour person.
Yes, this is a floor tile. It can go on your floor, no problem. This is a wall tile. Let's restrict that to walls only, shall we?
Yeah.
That was, the sort of thing. But, people would say, what patterns can you do? I did for some reason back in that day, it was half tile border, diagonal tiles. It was a trend.
Yeah. Yeah, wow.
Gets a little bit boring after a while.
Mate, later on in your career, you've done quite a bit of work with some big companies. And I know that throughout your entire career, well, I know personally more recently, you've done a lot of consultancy work, particularly when you're with Bayset. You're working there in a training capacity, and you obviously your consultancy has always been a big part of what you do, and that's obviously you've acquired so much knowledge over time to be able to do that. How was your time with Bayset? I mean, they're a great company. How was that period?
Oh, it was great. It was my consultancy work actually started before I started with Bayset. Right. I spent some time at Mapei where I met Mal Ferraro, who's the CEO of Bayset now.
Yeah.
And, one day we were talking and he said, well, you should come on board with us. I need a quality manager and I need a training manager. So I ended up being, after Bayset nationalised, I became the national quality and training manager. It's obviously quite important.
Yeah.
But I'm established a training system there for staff and for contractors, so that now there's the BASET Training and Education Centre is at head office at Coopers Plains. They've just moved, so they've got to rebuild that. So that'll be a bit of an expense for them. But every state has a training facility in it for contractors and staff, so that worked really well. And it's important, obviously staff need to be knowledgeable, but there's so many changes happening in the industry all the time that you need to make sure the contractors are kept up to date if they wish to show up. That's half the time that's the problem. You send invitations out, 30 people say that yes, I'll come, and then you get 15 turning up, but that's quite normal. And the quality management, I'm pretty proud of having set up the code mark system for all the BASET membranes. So they are pretty well the most highly tested and certified membrane systems on the Australian market right now.
Wow.
That was probably 3.5 years of work.
I was going to hazard a guess at a few years worth of work.
Yeah.
But
it's all worth it. So at the end of the day, it's all about making sure that the person who purchases the product gets exactly what they think they're getting. And there's nothing worse than opening a bucket and what it says on the label isn't exactly what you're getting. So you've got to make sure that what's in the bucket is what you get, and that should be the case across the industry. And I'm not saying that membranes who aren't code mark certified aren't good, or what's in those buckets isn't what it says in the bucket. It's just another layer of certification to make sure it's all legit.
It's a pretty powerful statement, right? Being able to stand behind a product and talk about that with a contractor or a customer about the qualities of what they're buying.
Correct, and you need to back it up, obviously, with warranties. You've been in the material supply market yourself. I think you sell tile adhesives and membranes, and most warranties are defect warranties. I warrant that my product's free from defects. Very, very few warranties are I warrant that my product will perform in that job, which I think is a much more powerful warranty system.
Absolutely.
I wish people would adopt it.
Do you think we'll get there, that'll ever happen in the industry in some way, shape or form?
Until such time that it is a legal requirement to follow the Australian standards, probably not. I don't think a lot of people actually know that there's no legal requirement to follow the vast majority of Australian standards. There's some safety standards of toys and vehicles and all that sort of stuff. They're legally required standards. Building in bushfire zone, that standard is empowered by a section of an Act of Parliament, so you have to follow that. All other Australian standards are virtually voluntary. Like AS/NZS 4858, which is the internal waterproofing membrane standard. You don't really have to follow that standard if you're selling a waterproofing membrane into the market. But what you can't do is you can't say that it complies when it doesn't.
Yes.
That'll get you in trouble. Same with tile adhesives. There's plenty of tile adhesives in the market where nowhere on the data sheet does it say that this tile adhesive complies with ISO 13007. That's not illegal. What would be illegal is if they said it and it doesn't comply.
Yeah.
However, the other side of that is, as a contractor, you're likely to have a contractual obligation to follow the standard that is applicable to your trade. So 3958 currently says you should use tile adhesives that comply with the standard. The new one has slightly different wording. it will say you shall use adhesives that comply with that standard. So that ambiguity is taken away.
And that's really important that that's removed. And you touch on a really awesome point. I know that we've had a couple of brief conversations about that, and I've been aware of the fact that a committee has been working on updates to the existing standard. You and the team have been working, I imagine, pretty tirelessly over the last couple of years or few years to get it to where it is today. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's coming or what's here already?
Well, can't give a lot of it away, unfortunately. If people want to look at it, they need to have a look at the public comment draft. And look, I'm happy for you to put a link in the comments of the bottom of this video. People should really look at it and comment. But it is, so the current standard 3958.1 and 0.2 are basically both guides. So 3958.1 was published in 2007. It is an age standard and required review. So that was done. 3958.2, I'm pretty sure, was published in 1992.
Wow.
And that's a super aged one, and that's selection of a ceramic tiling system. So you and I both know, and so does every one of your listeners, that the tiling systems have significantly changed in that time.
Yeah.
So they've now been combined into one document. So 3958 doesn't have 0.1 or 0.2 anymore. It's just 3958, and it's installation of ceramic and stone tiles. So it now covers all tiles, whether they're stone. And stone includes reconstituted and natural stone, of course. And so it's no longer a guide. So I don't know whether you're aware the difference between shall and should in an Australian standard.
I would be not the best at saying that I am or am not.
So in simple terms, if a standard says you shall do this, it's a mandatory statement. So in order to follow this standard, which you're likely to be contractually obliged to follow, if it says shall, then you must do whatever it says, right? If it says should, it's kind of optional.
Right.
However, if you don't follow it, you want to have a bloody good reason not to.
Why not? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So in 3958.1, which is still the current standard, it actually says the word shall only once, believe it or not. And it is for applying adhesive with a notch trail. And it talks about applying the adhesive, drawing the notch trail through the adhesive and creating ribs. And the line says the ribs shall be horizontal for walls. That's the only time it says shall. Everything else is all should. So literally whatever is in the standard currently is technically optional.
Yeah, right.
However, your contract, it'll be a tough argument to say, oh, it says should, therefore I didn't have to follow. Yeah. So, but, in the new standard, it's got hundreds of shalls.
Yeah, right.
You shall use an adhesive that meets the adhesive standards. You shall do this. You shall do that. So it removes the ambiguity. It doesn't mean because, like I said, there's no legal requirement to follow this standard. It doesn't mean that you have no options other than to do what's in the standard. If you look, let's be honest. If the tiles are stuck to whatever you're sticking them to for the next 25 years, no one's going to ask you any questions.
Correct. It's
only when they fall off that people like me come in and go, all right, let's compare these to what it said in the standard.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't meet the standard, well, sorry, Mr. Tyler, you have some work to do.
Yeah.
And that was the case with me. The main reason why I ended up in the consulting space was I actually had a failure of tiles installed to a pool surround. when I had to dig them all up and replace them. And the people told me, and this was in like probably 1999. I did that job like very early in my working for myself career. And people told me, well, you haven't followed the standard here, here, and here. And I thought, might be a good idea if I read this bloody standard, eh? So I read the standard, and that sort of led me to a point where, right, so there's that standard. Wonder what other standards there are. And then, it just went away from there. Look, when I bought the tile shop, and you're supplying tiles, and there's another 13 or 14 standards that have to do with tiles. If you're supplying tile adhesives to contractors or consumers, you want to make sure the adhesives that you're selling actually do what they say they're going to do. So that really opened my eyes to what standards are out there, and what you need to read.
I remember from my time in the adhesive waterproofing space, working for a couple of different manufacturers here in Australia, one of the big things that we would talk about a lot when we're on job sites, and unfortunately back in the days when I was working and going to job sites, it was never a good phone call. It was, I need you to come and have a look at it. I've got an issue with the product. Where today it's very different. Today there's a lot. I know a lot of the companies are very good at training and going to site and spending time with some contractors and many contractors out there. So the industry's changed a lot in the past decade. However, there was always that. One of the things that I always tell people when I go out there is that, and I'd leave them with the information on where to actually purchase a copy of the standards, so they had that with them, so that in future they could reference that guide, because there was always times where people would, contact you and ask you questions. And I'm like, for that small investment, just have it in your car, your van, whatever, have it there, because when I was in the industry, digital wasn't as proficient as what it is today. And so, it was one of the things that we used to do often.
Yeah. And look, realistically, Australian standards really have a life of 10 years, right? So when you buy a standard, it's going to be enforced for 10 years, give or take, unless there's some major changes in the building code. And the tiling standard's probably going to cost you, the new one, it's a pretty big document. I'd say it's probably going to be $350.
Yeah.
It's $35 a year. Come on.
Cheap insurance.
It's not so much even that it's insurance. It is, at least you can say, okay, I've followed the standard, but it's still gone wrong. What's happening?
Yeah.
And there's provisions in the standard, especially in the new one, that as a contractor, you should use in your negotiations with a builder. Like in the waterproofing standard, for example, it says the substrate must be prepared to such and such a standard. So as a waterproofer, why, if the builder gives you a substrate that isn't any good, there's no reason why you can't use the standard to say, hey, Mr. Builder, I'm contractually obligated to follow the standard. The substrate you've given me doesn't meet that standard. Can you please fix it up? Or here's my quote to fix it for you.
Yeah.
There's no, and I think contractors really need to use the standards in their favour more, rather than seeing it as something, now I've got to do this because this idiot of the standards committee have written this up. Well, use it for your own benefit. For the end of the day, we're all looking for the same outcome, right? We want a job that looks good and doesn't fail. I really don't think anyone goes out, wakes up in the morning and goes, really going to stuff things up today.
Yeah.
I think everyone's in the same boat.
I don't think anybody intentionally plans to go back to a job site more than once.
No, it's ludicrous if you did.
Yeah.
And look, that failure that I had didn't cost me a lot of money, to be honest. But mate, it put a bit of a hole in my ego, and I said to myself, these things are never happening again.
Mm.
And it didn't.
Yeah.
Mm.
Pretty powerful lesson to learn from, hey?
Well, just you learn a new lesson every day, really, don't you?
Well, yeah. 1%
Mm.
change every day, mate, by the end of the year, 37% increase in year on year.
That's it. Mm.
So I'm going to definitely put that link in the show notes. Not that we're finished yet, by the way. And when's the cutoff for public comment?
Look, I think it's in early June, but I'd have to look it up.
That's okay. It gives people a couple of
Yeah.
months
Yeah.
or a month.
It might be the end of May. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's you probably if you get in there in the next 4 weeks, you can have a look at it. And look, honestly, if there's something in there, if people look at it that you think is silly or you don't like or don't understand, please make a comment.
Mhm.
That's the only way we can improve these standards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
And what's the expected time frame post public comment shut off?
Look, that is going to depend on the number of comments. So what happens with the comments is Standards Australia's project manager collates all the comments, and the committee reviews all those comments, and I'll imagine it'll be 4 or 5 meetings. We review all the comments, we make whatever adjustments are necessary to the standard. Then it goes to a ballot. If the majority agree that the standard should be published, then it'll be published. And look, I actually think it'll be designated 2023. So I wouldn't be surprised if it hit the shelves in September, October, or something like that. But please don't hold me to it. I can't make any promises, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's what the timeline was.
Mate, that's it's pretty exciting actually. I've been in the game a while, and to see an updated version of that document come out is pretty exciting.
Well, when it was written, so it was published in 2007,
Yeah.
which means it was probably drafted between 2005 and 6.
Yeah.
And based on what's in the standard, the biggest tile available at the time was a 450 by 450, right? So it certainly needed some updates just based on the tile format to start with.
Yeah.
And there's been changes in other areas of construction. There's more lightweight construction going in. So, we've certainly put some provisions in for substrate deflection that are a little bit stronger than they used to be.
Yeah.
Stone tiles really were not covered that well, but now they're included. Who knew what a reconstituted stone tile was back then? Certainly not many people in Australia.
Mm. I think there's a heap of added benefits to having an updated document, and it's also you touched on it before. People can now have a more informed conversations. So the contractor can have more informed conversation with the builder, and they can actually speak with a lot of modern substance around particular things that are happening on a job site, and they can actually refer to the document. It's very difficult, although it was written in the early 2000s and then published in 2007. It's very difficult to pull that document out today and have that conversation, because it's very, very easy for someone just to go, yeah, mate, it says 2007 on it. It's 2023.
Yes.
Mate, I'm not really going to listen to something that's 16-year-old.
Yeah, well, that's true for this particular standard, but not for all of them. So there's quite a few standards out there that might have been published in the early 2000s, but have been reconfirmed because nothing's really changed and required them to be updated. So, but certainly you're right that particular document needed an update, big time.
Excellent. That's exciting. Can't wait to see it.
Well,
I mean,
there's a bit more to come.
Yeah, well, I've got my public commentary to do yet. So now that I know the time frame, I will be scheduling that in to have a bit of a read through.
Yes.
An avid reader of that sort of stuff.
But what we also did as part of this particular process was we added 2 new standards into the tile adhesive. group of standards.
Oh, nice.
So so you've got the 13,007 series, which is always been for tile adhesive and for grout.
Yep.
As that was parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. We've now added part 5 and part 6, and they're actually for waterproofing membrane compatibility with tiling systems.
Oh my God, that's so
Right.
good.
Yes. So very few people know that they actually exist. Right.
Oh wow.
So they were based, obviously, they're ISO standards, International Standards Organisation, which we've adopted into Australia. So 13,007.5 is liquid applied waterproofing membranes that are part of a tiling system, and point 6 is sheet applied waterproofing membranes that are part of a tiling system.
Mm.
And just the testing requirements are very similar to tile adhesive, except rather than bonding a tile to a normal standard concrete block to do the testing, you now need to stick them to the waterproofing membrane you're testing. And then obviously measure the adhesion strength after certain test parameters.
Mm.
One of the important tests, believe it or not, is that these tests actually test if the waterproofing membrane is waterproof.
Yeah, okay.
You wouldn't believe it, but the waterproofing standards we had before, 4858 and 4654, there's no testing that the membrane's actually waterproof.
Hmm. Wow.
Yeah, I know. Wow, right?
Wow. Okay. Onwards and upwards. The future is here.
Well, the future is progressing in a positive direction. Let's
100%. Yeah, and I authentically mean that. Like it's such a sigh of relief to see so many different people working behind the scenes to make this happen. And I'm not across all the different members. Is it the BD 44 committee?
Yeah, 44 is for tiles, 38 is for waterproofing.
Waterproofing.
I'm a member of both. Yeah.
I know a couple of other members that are involved, but I don't know the full scope of members, and I can only be thankful for everyone's time
Yeah, it's the amount of time, if you converted that into dollars, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The members of the committee members have given up, and there's the normal committee members, but there's also working groups which draw in other people with certain areas of expertise.
Mm.
So there's a lot of time was spent on revising this new tiling standard.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Mm.
I love it. Well, Frank, I'm going to wind back a little bit, if that's okay, and ask you a couple of questions, because I have jumped forward somewhat in today's catch-up. And, mate, you've already said it, but I'm going to ask anyway. What's one of the biggest mistakes you've made in your career that's helped shape who you are today?
Oh, that failure wasn't it.
Oh, okay. I thought it might be.
Oh, no. Look, I've made some blunders, right?
Yeah.
But look, honestly, I don't tend to focus on individual mistakes. Right? Every single thing I've done has led me to where I am right now. Whether it was good or bad, it worked, it didn't work, and I'm quite happy where I am. Right?
Awesome.
As far as I'm concerned, look, first of all, I think you need to make mistakes, because otherwise there's no incentive to get better.
Mm.
It's kind of not unlike evolution, right? If you don't have any adversity, nothing evolves. Everything stays the same. There's no need to change, right? So you need to make mistakes. The only bad mistake is the one you don't learn from.
Mm. Agree.
And importantly, and that's probably one thing I've found, there's always a way forward. You might have thought you just made the biggest blunder in the world. Unless it killed you, there's generally always a way forward. And that's what I believe. And the other thing, that's another important lesson I've learned, is it's much cheaper to learn from other people's mistakes.
So I'm going to guess that you're an avid reader.
I do read a bit.
Yep. Cool.
Sadly, I read a lot of standards, so call me a nerd if you like. But it's kind of the look. Look, I have to, right?
Yeah.
If you're in the consulting space, in you comparing things that have been done and failed to the standard, you've got no choice but to read it. And look, mate, I've read the tiling and waterproofing standards so many times, and I still find new things in there that I hadn't noticed before. And sometimes it's a different interpretation of something that I thought was written, but when you reinterpret and you go, oh, that could actually mean something else if I interpret it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, I do read other stuff as well.
You got a particular flavour, mate? Are you a podcast guy? Do you like, educating yourself on different things, or are you
whenever I'm driving, I have a podcast going of some description.
Nice.
Yeah.
The world's way more connected now these days with podcasts. It's flooded with so much content, but it's such an advantage, right? Because you mentioned earlier on in today's episode about, leaving a legacy behind. I think that's a really super powerful thing to say and to actually put into action, because we have the ability now to do all of these types of recordings and interview people and, tap into the knowledge that is available and share it with the wider community and help educate others.
And it's awesome to see one for our industry.
Yeah.
And I'm actually glad I was listening to the one he did with Chris Stenhouse the other day, and he actually mentioned that, waterproofing is moving forward in leaps and bounds compared to tiling, and he's absolutely right. And I'm so happy that you're doing this podcast for tiling. Yeah, and hopefully people will. I don't know how much they're going to take from my ramblings today, but hopefully they'll take something.
You'd be surprised, mate. I had a few people say to me, get Frank on. We want to hear from Frank. So there's at least 3.
Oh, 3. Oh, well, that's good. Well, yeah.
No, mate, look, I'll
make sure that the payment is transferred.
Mate, you've people like yourself who have been in the industry for a long time, who the broader community want to hear from, as well as other, different people as well. But you've got so much to share. You've got.
Well, no, sorry, you go.
No. I was just going to say it's actually it's excellent to be able to bring people like yourself and others into this sort of environment and just get the information out there to, especially to the younger people thinking about or even in the trade, to encourage them to stick at it and keep going, because I know that there's a big drop-off rate with apprentices across many trades. However, I think tiling gets the raw end of the stick because of, some of the things that happen in our industry. Maybe it's not as licensed or regulated or whatever words some people choose to use. They're not all necessarily accurate. But we sort of, if we can encourage them to be more involved in the industry, they're going to stay longer. It's going to help promote, tiling. It's going to help the longevity of the industry, right? And we're not going to hand it over to another flooring provider. We don't want tiling to become this mythical creature in the lagoon somewhere where, people choose to do it every now and again rather than, in every house.
Well, tiling's just not seen as a glamorous trade, I worked for probably 12 or so months for a group training company, All Trades Queensland.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So, we employed apprentices, and then we basically hired them out to host employers. And everyone wanted to be a chippy. Like, you get kids in and they say, oh, well, okay, looking for an apprenticeship. What do you want to do? Oh, I want to be a carpenter. Okay, well, we've got way too many carpenters. How about, we've got openings in plastering, we've got openings in tiling, we've got openings in painting. And, sometimes you get guys, not that I think group training is the best idea, but it certainly makes it a little bit easier for some employers, to get apprentices on. Because, it's a big commitment signing a kid up for for a 4-year tiling or 3.5 year, whatever it is now, tiling apprenticeship, you're almost guaranteeing that person that you're going to give them work for 4 years and teach them the skills to be a competent tiler by the end of it. Unfortunately, that doesn't always work. Business changes. And the other thing is, difficult to convince young people to come into a trade at the moment. I don't know what you get as an apprentice now. It's probably $3 or $4 an hour less than you get at McDonald's flipping burgers. So what's the incentive for the young people to start? That's probably what we need to address. And then you got the other side of the coin, where we all know there's a skills shortage. And when you're a government, well, how do you measure that you're doing something about the skills shortage? Well, the only way to measure it is by counting the number of certificate threes or whatever you sign off on in a 12-month period. So is the incentive now to train people, or is the incentive to hand out certificate threes? And that's how we end up having a skills shortage in an actual skill level rather than skills. We've probably got a skill level shortage than a skills shortage. And that's probably what we need to address. And just because you got a Cert 3, that's another lesson I learned. Doesn't mean you're good enough to run your own business, that's for sure. You've just become a competent tiler running your own business. That's a whole other equation.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a statement. It's a statement that I heard recently. I'm doing a bit of volunteer work now up here in Queensland, and I'm going through a whole bunch of competency training at the moment. And one of our trainers said to us only a couple of weeks ago, he said, "Yes, just because you've received the certificate to say that you're competent doesn't mean, to say that you're compliant, or maybe I'm saying this wrong, but doesn't mean that you're competent in being able to practice what you've learned, or to implement what you've learned until you've practiced it a number of times, because the certificate says one thing, but if you actually don't apply what you've learned on a regular basis, there's probably not a lot of way that you can become proficient over a short and long period of time."
Yeah, well, if you have a look at the government training website, the certificate 3 level, right? If you have a qualification at that level, the intention is that makes you competent to work in that qualification as part of a team. It is not meant to qualify you to be the owner of that business or to lead that team. The system, in Germany where I grew up, the system is I think, if they're still doing it right now, but it was certainly better at the time. So you had to do your apprenticeship, then you had to work for 2 years as a tradesman, and then you had to go to what they call master school, which was 6 months full-time master school, and then you're a master of wall and floor tiling, and only then could you operate your own business.
Yeah, wow.
And that might be difficult to do these days with, and it's got to be funded somehow, but then you're certainly much more ready to run your own business. And, sometimes I think we're actually setting young fellas or ladies up to fail by giving them a Cert 3. To get a Queensland license as a contractor, you need to have a Cert 3 in whatever trade. The Cert 3 counts as experience, the time you spent. And then you need to go and do a business management course. And the business management course is you show up on Friday, they wake you up on Sunday afternoon, and here's your certificate. Essentially, there's a little bit more to it, but it's not that. But if you think you learn how to run a business in 3 days, I have news.
Yeah, it's a pipe dream, right? Well, mate, tell me, you've held various roles throughout your career. Is there a favourite position or role that you've held in everything you've done?
This role right now is by far my favourite. I mean, look, the time at Bayshead, establishing the system there, putting the training centre in place, fantastic. Look, and but I achieved what I wanted to achieve there, and really what I was originally hired for, and I've come back into consulting. What I don't like in this business is go to jobs that have failed. That bit I hate, because I've just basically got to say to someone, mate, you really stuffed this up, and here's the reasons why. Right? What I'd rather do, and which is what I try and spend more time on, is actually get involved with builders and architects and contractors at the design stage. Let's get together. Let's have a look at the design and the selection of products and what you're doing, and try and avoid the problems before they happen. And you do that more in the waterproofing space than in the tiling space. But certainly, I've been involved in 8-story tiled facades of buildings. Now you really got to think about what you're doing with that, because if you got a 600 by 300 porcelain tile coming down the wall from 8 stories high, it's going to do a little bit of damage to someone if it hits them in the head. Yeah. And I've seen those collapse. There was I've been involved in a rectification of one of those jobs. Apparently, spot fixing tiles on these walls was a good idea.
Yeah, still a very common practice that happens out there today, unfortunately.
Well, I'm not saying that you must not do spot fixing, but if you do, you certainly must pick the right adhesive. There's certainly adhesives where the manufacturer says this is suitable for spot fixing.
Yeah.
But it's going to be epoxy based or 2-part polyurethane based. It's not going to be a $25 bag of rubber based adhesive.
No, definitely not. I think a lot of the times people underestimate the other parameters around jobs, and sometimes they think that that method can work. It's universal. You just apply it to anything and it should work. But fortunately, we all know that that's not necessarily the case.
And of course, the whole thing changes if your substrate is a waterproofing membrane. Because if you're spot fixing to a membrane, well, it's got a certain adhesion strength to its substrate. And if you're concentrating all those loads off the tiling system to 4 or 5 spots, then is the membrane going to be strong enough to hold it in 4 or 5 spots? If you have 95% adhesive coverage across the whole tile, there's plenty of structural membranes out there that will do 8 stories on a masonry substrate, no problem.
Yeah.
But if you're spot fixing to a membrane, there's a good chance you're going to rip the membrane off the wall before you're doing anything else.
Yeah. I'm sure that you've seen plenty of those jobs.
I do. But, like I said, my favourite bit is to prevent the problems. And I would probably get an average of 5 phone calls a week of contractors that I know, that'll just ring up and say, hey, I got this job. What do you think I should do? And I'm more than happy to talk them through what I think. I'd rather do that than be engaged later on by a homeowner or a court of law to figure out why it went wrong. I don't earn any money out of that, but it's still that makes me much more happy than dealing with the issues and later on. And that's still going to occur. And it's, especially in the waterproofing stage, it's not often the waterproofer's fault. Quite often it was built wrong to start with or poorly designed. And I guess the same is true for tiling as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Frank, you've been a champion today. I really appreciated having you on the show. And we always like to finish off with some fast track questions. So I'm going to throw a couple at you today before we wrap things up.
Here we go.
So that's all right, mate. They're not too curly. Tell me if you could choose a country in the world to live beyond home here in Australia, where would you live?
This might surprise you. Egypt.
How so?
Well, my wife and I went to Egypt in 2012, 5, 6, something like that, and it's just fantastic. It was, we both, when we were over there for, quite a while, obviously looked at all the old stuff, did a Nile cruise, but it was, we said to each other, oh, we could retire here. I'm quite happy to live there.
Yeah, wow.
Probably won't happen, but, in Australia, if I had the money, I'd have a winter house in Port Douglas and a summer house somewhere in Tasmania.
Oh my God.
That would be ideal.
Yeah. You and I both, mate. I think if I could choose two different places to live in Australia during winter and summer, there would be two. We've we talked a little bit about reading and podcasts. Is there anything at the moment in particular that you're listening to or reading that is you want to share with us? What is it? What is there something that's really you're interested in that we'd like to know about?
Oh, look, I listen to so many different things. I listen to Lex Friedman's podcast. I listen to Andrew Huberman's podcast, and it's kind of the bits, how people, what makes people think, what goes on in people's head, how does different chemistry of affects people's. I'm not talking illicit substances chemistry either, right?
That's a Joe Rogan podcast, mate. I think that one.
Yes. Oh well, quite a few of those. I've listened to a few of his as well, but
yeah,
they're the sort of things I listen to. I like to understand what makes people tick and why people behave certain ways. And probably the main reason for that is in the consultancy space, if something goes wrong, half the time you actually act as a mediator. Because the worst outcome is a court date for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you can get to a point where you can say to the homeowner, okay, how about we have a separate conversation with a contractor? We'll just have a chat outside and we'll come to a solution. Are you happy if your outcome is that your bathroom, whatever it is fixed up and you got a habitable home? Yes, I'll be happy. Right, that's established. Let's talk to the contractor and see how we can get to that point. So, and that's kind of the reason why I listen to that stuff. And it's just way easier. If you have to go to court, it's just a nightmare for everybody.
Yeah. No, there's some cool authors.
Yeah, there is. And if you've got a problem, I know it affects you, and I've been there myself. In when I had that tiling failure, I was reasonably young. I didn't want to deal with it and, put my head in the sand for a little while. But at the end of the day, when I resolved it, I fixed it. I created it, sealed the movement joint, got out of there. Man, it was like a 7-ton weight off my shoulders because that episode was just done with. And I think people just need to, if you've got a problem, just deal with it, move on, because otherwise that dark cloud hovering around your head for weeks and weeks and weeks, it's not healthy. It's much better just to pick that up. And look, if I'm more than happy, if someone has an issue and they need my help, fine. Happy to talk you through it, happy to, come to site, talk to the homeowner, come to a solution. Let's do it.
Yeah, that's a pretty honourable thing to offer, Frank, and I know that's your character and the person that you are, and it's a really beautiful thing to say.
No, some people might disagree with you on that.
That's right. We're all different. We're all different, mate. It's okay. We all have different opinions. One last fast track question, mate, and then I'll let you get out of here. What do you think the construction industry is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, well, I can't see a huge amount of changes because a lot of the work still needs hands-on. Yes, we can 3D print houses. You've obviously seen those mortar machines that are run around and 3D print the walls. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I don't ever see a time where a tiler isn't going to be required. unless we get rid of tiles altogether, which I don't see either.
Been around for thousands of years, mate. We can't get rid of it now.
Yeah. The materials might change.
Mm.
You know, I think we need to find something other than cement as a binder. Cement is just an environmental disaster. You know, you're burning a coral reef to make cement, essentially. You know, the energy input in that is ridiculous. If we can find a more environmentally friendly binder to bind sand together and gravel to make concrete structures, I'm all for it. You know, they're available, but at the moment they're bloody expensive, so they're not going to get used. Tiles, you know, people think that they're not all that environmentally friendly because there's a lot of energy input into baking them in an oven. But if they're done right, you know, massive longevity. So over time, the energy footprint isn't so big. I mean, there's, you know, tiles installed in ancient Rome, which is still quite in place. So if it's done right, tiles last a long, long time.
Mate, I've seen countless examples of archaeologists digging up, you know, different ruins, and then all of a sudden, bang, you know, you'll see this brand new tile bed that's just been hand brushed, and it looks like it was laid yesterday. So,
yeah. So yeah, I think there's always going to be something for the tile industry. Like I said, materials will change. There's going to have to be a big review of tile adhesive systems. We can't keep going the way we are with those. I mean, back when I had my tile shop in the early 2000s, we used to sell a bag of glue for $25. Now there's bags of glue that are still $25. Well, how do you get to that? Well, you have to take materials out to make the product cheaper, and then you're affecting the longevity of the system. So I think there's some work that needs to be done in the tile adhesive space, because we're going to get to a point of no return where, you know, you're looking at the life expectancy of a tiling system to be 10 years. That's not sustainable. We can't be doing that. That's better techniques and better adhesive systems. Yeah, and look, adhesive manufacturers are like everything else. You know, they're in business to make a profit, and they need to make a profit to carry out the R&D to improve the system. So you've got to have that cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, that's another podcast talking about that.
Yeah, no, mate. It's a great share. Trust me. Well, Frank, again, mate, thanks for today. I know we've been bouncing around with each other via email to coordinate today, and we've both had some other commitments outside of the show. So I really want to thank you for your time, and for the wider community and broader audience, if they want to connect in with you directly, what's the best platforms for them to reach out to you and have a chat?
I'm not really a social media sort of guy, so probably LinkedIn. If you're going to go to one of those sort of product systems, is the easiest. Lots of people have my phone number. Happy for you people just to ring me direct. And
okay,
I'm not really keen on putting my phone number on as a link, because the bot will pick it up. But I'm sure if they send you a direct message, mate, I'm happy for you to share it. Or just contact me via LinkedIn.
Yeah, you seem pretty active via LinkedIn, mate. I definitely think that'll be a perfect platform to jump in and have a chat. So we'll get that in the show notes, mate, for everyone to have a chat with you directly. And again, thank you for your time. It's been great having you on today. Can't wait to have a part 2 with you at some point in the future.
I look forward to it. That'd be great.
Once we get into maybe the launch of the new document and the new standards, and there'll be a lot to talk about, and hopefully we can generate a big buzz throughout the industry to really embrace everything that's been done from you and the team. And thank you as well for the work that you and the team have done. I know Fred's a part of that as well. And
yes, Fred and Rolf from Ardex, and
Rolf,
lots of other people.
Yeah. So,
and look, the waterproofing committee has got a lots and lots of very knowledgeable people in it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Frank, thanks, buddy. Have a terrific evening, and until next time, mate, stay connected.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Tiling Connect. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast. To see more of Tiling Connect, jump on our socials and follow us via LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. If you'd like to be part of the show, email us at tilingconnect@gmail.com. Until next time, stay connected.